Your brain has a time machine. You don't control when it activates. You don't choose the destination. And it doesn't use photographs or music or words. It uses smell. One specific smell, one you probably haven't encountered in 20 years, can return you to a moment from childhood more completely than any photograph ever could. Scientists have spent decades trying to understand why. And the answer comes down to one remarkable fact about your brain that makes smell unlike every other sense you have. But before we get to the science, I want you to try something. Close your eyes for just a second. Think about the smell after rain, the first drops falling onto dry earth after a long summer day, fresh cut grass, your grandmother's kitchen, the first day of school. You probably recognized at least one of them, maybe without even trying, because some memories never disappear. They simply wait for the right smell. Welcome to Hidden Nature. Today we're exploring one of the most extraordinary abilities of the human brain. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why a single smell can do something that photographs, music, and even spoken words almost never can. It can take you home. This experience is so common that scientists gave it a name: involuntary autobiographical memory. Most people simply call it being suddenly transported. The phenomenon became famous more than a century ago. In 1913, the French writer Marcel Proust described dipping a small cake called a madeleine into tea. The moment he tasted and smelled it, his entire childhood returned, not as a story, not as a thought, but as if he were living it again. For decades, people believed Proust had simply written one of literature's most beautiful passages. Today, we know something remarkable. He was also describing real neuroscience, because what Proust experienced has now been measured inside the human brain. That sudden flood of emotion, the vividness, the overwhelming feeling of being there instead of remembering it. It's real. And it happens for one reason. The way your nose connects to your brain is completely different from every other sense you have. Sight, sound, touch, taste. They all take the long route. Smell doesn't. And that single anatomical difference changes everything. Every sense you have follows almost the same path. When you see something, the signal from your eyes travels first to a structure deep inside your brain called the thalamus. Think of it as a central train station. Almost every sight, every sound, every touch, every taste passes through this station before reaching the parts of your brain where you become consciously aware of it. The thalamus filters information, organizes it, decides what's important. Only then does it send those signals on to the thinking brain. Smell does something extraordinary. It completely bypasses the station. There are no stops, no waiting, no filter. Instead, the olfactory nerve travels almost directly into two of the oldest structures inside your brain: the hippocampus, where memories are formed, and the amygdala, where emotions are attached to those memories. Researchers often describe this as the most direct sensory pathway in the human nervous system, which means something remarkable happens. Before your conscious mind has even identified a smell, before you've found words for it, before you've had time to think, your emotional brain has already reacted. Your memory has already opened. That's why smell feels different. A photograph asks your brain to remember. A smell simply opens the door, but that raises an even stranger question. Why is it almost always childhood? You've smelled thousands of things as an adult. Coffee every morning, fresh laundry, airports, hotels, perfume, new cars, restaurants, entire countries. Yet somehow, it's the smell of your grandmother's kitchen or rain falling onto warm pavement that stops you in your tracks. Why? Scientists believe the answer begins with something children experience every single day: novelty. When you're young, almost everything is happening for the first time. The smell of your classroom, your family's car, fresh crayons, wet autumn leaves, the ocean, the Christmas tree, your grandmother's house. Your brain doesn't know these smells yet, so it pays attention. The hippocampus treats these moments as important. and stores them with extraordinary detail. Not only the smell, but the emotion, the light, the people, the season, even the feeling of being that age. As adults, very few smells are truly new. Most arrive in a brain that already has a category for them. They get filed away, not engraved. Researchers at Rockefeller University found that smell-triggered memories come disproportionately from the first decade of life, far more often than memories triggered by photographs, sounds, or words. In other words, your childhood wasn't just the first chapter of your life. It was the chapter your brain wrote in the deepest ink. And decades later, one familiar smell can open that page again, almost exactly as you left it. But there's one more layer to this story, and it's something neuroscientists have only begun to understand over the last few decades. A smell doesn't simply bring back an image, it brings back the emotion that originally belonged to that moment. Think about the difference. When you look at an old photograph, you remember. You know you're looking at the past. You stay here, in the present. But smell works differently. For just a few seconds, the emotional brain behaves as if the past is happening again. The amygdala, the part of the brain that stored the emotional tone of the original experience, becomes active once more. Not metaphorically, not poetically. Scientists can actually see it happening. You don't just remember feeling safe. For a brief moment, you feel safe. You don't simply remember your grandmother standing in the kitchen. For an instant, it almost feels as though she's still there. This is why smell memories are often described as more vivid than any photograph, more real, more immediate, because they don't simply tell your brain what happened. They allow your brain to feel part of it again. Researchers studying grief have noticed something remarkable. People often describe a familiar scent as the moment they feel closest to someone they've lost. A father's old jacket, a mother's perfume, the smell of a house that no longer exists. These aren't just memories. They're emotional pathways, still waiting inside the brain. Perhaps that's why smell is often the last doorway back to people we thought we'd lost forever. There's something quietly beautiful about all of this. Some of the smells that shaped your childhood no longer exist anywhere on earth. The exact smell of your grandmother's kitchen, the scent of your family's old car, a classroom that has long since been demolished, a wooden cabin that's been replaced, the garden where you played as a child. Those places may be gone. The people may be gone. Even the molecules that created those smells disappeared decades ago. And yet, your brain still carries them, not in a photograph, not in words, but as a living pattern of neurons. Waiting, scientists sometimes describe memory as reconstruction. Every time we remember something, the brain rebuilds it. But smell is different. It doesn't just rebuild the picture, it rebuilds the atmosphere, the emotion, the feeling of being exactly that age. In a way, your brain has become the last place where those worlds still exist. When one familiar smell returns, for a few extraordinary seconds, a piece of the past becomes real again. Not because time moved backwards, but because your brain never truly let it go the next time it happens. And it will happen. Don't rush past it. Pause. Take one more breath. Ask yourself, where did this smell just take me? Not just what you remembered, but what you felt. The warmth, the light, the size of the room, the version of yourself that suddenly came back to life. For a few extraordinary seconds, your brain did something no photograph, no song, and no written story could fully accomplish. It didn't simply remind you of the past. It allowed you to visit it. Scientists can explain the neurons, the olfactory pathways, the hippocampus, the amygdala. They can explain how it happens. But perhaps there's something just as remarkable about why it happens. Maybe the brain never intended memories to stay locked away forever. Maybe some of them were always meant to wait, hidden, inside ordinary moments, inside the smell of rain, fresh cut grass, an old wooden house, or bread baking in a grandmother's kitchen, waiting patiently for one quiet breath to bring them back. So, I'd love to ask you something. What smell takes you home? Tell me in the comments. Not just the smell, but the memory it carries. I read every single one. Some of those memories become part of future hidden nature stories, because every one of us carries a small, invisible museum inside our minds, filled with places that only smell still knows how to find. Thank you for spending these moments with me. I'm glad you were here. Subscribe to Hidden Nature, because the most extraordinary parts of nature are not always hidden in distant forests or deep beneath the ocean. Sometimes, they've been quietly living inside you your entire life.